Welcome to Off the Supply Chain, a show for shippers. If the supply chain is all about cooperative competition, so is our show. We're bringing you compelling perspectives from 3 industry experts. With the rise of e-commerce and generous return policies, companies are experiencing higher return rates than ever before, putting reverse logistics in the spotlight. Companies must figure out how to get their product back, and once they do, how will it be repurposed, repackaged, or even resold? That's just one question we'll be tackling on this episode of Off the Supply Chain. Now to our host, Chad Prevost.
Joining us today on The Science of Returns, Tim Dooner, an industry veteran who has held director's positions in operations, sales, consulting, and marketing. He has worked with a wide range of companies from FedEx to Louis Vuitton. Anthony Smith examines macroeconomic trends and their potential impact on the transportation industry at FreightWaves. As an economic consultant, he's forecasted industry trends for Fortune 500 companies and advised executives on how to navigate market downturns. David Falkenberry has over 30 years of first to final mile experience helping Fortune 500 brands shift from traditional retail to e-commerce enabled supply chains. These are the rules of the game. Each guest gets 40 seconds to respond with a 30-second follow-up. And of course, this is the supply chain show of competitive banter, so we keep score. When you hear this sound, you have 10 seconds. When you hear this sound, you're out of time. This sound means you get a point. And this sound means you lose a point. In the past, some luxury fashion brands have caused public outrage when they were called out for burning unsold or returned merchandise in order to retain customer exclusivity. Burberry was at the forefront of the scandal after it was reported the luxury brand destroyed more than $35 million worth of goods in 2017 to prevent them from being stolen or sold cheaply. Last year, the retailer said it would stop burning products immediately, but it turns out that in many cases, suppliers destroy goods of all kinds by the tens of thousands on a daily basis. No one would disagree that the scale of the destruction is disturbing. The question is, why does it happen in the first place? Dooner.
It's built into customs regulations. There's this great thing that, when used properly, is called duty drawback. And that means when you bring something into the United States and you export it, you can get 99% of the duties back. The problem is that there's another version of drawback, which means that instead of exporting it, you can destroy it. So when you're talking about some of these high-label brands, your Gucci's, your Pradas of the world, some handbags that cost $10,000 to $30,000 retail, on invoice value, those are still $1,000 to $10,000, and there's 25% duties on these. So we're talking about $250,000, $1 million duty drawback returns.
Well, what do you think, Anthony?
I think there's something to that, maybe, but I think the bigger part is these luxury brands, right? So when we're looking at luxury brands, they act a little bit differently than we have typical brands. So when we look at luxury brands, the elasticity is a little bit different, the demand's different. They want to maintain that exclusivity to that. And so I think the issue is, how do they produce a large enough amount and supply their key demographic without cheapening their brand and limiting their amount of sales?
Well, that is true. It is about that exclusivity, but it seems to be happening across the board for all kinds of brands. As part of the question, David, what do you think?
Well, I think this has been going on for a long time. I remember early in my career in last mile, we used to get orders to destroy brand new computer equipment and copy machines, mainframes that cost $240,000 and up. And the reason was the manufacturer didn't want those goods to go into the secondary market and reduce the price they'd be charging for the next iteration of their product. This is true for luxury brands, but it's also true for other brands. So I don't think it's something that's going to go away quickly. Brands they spend a lot of money in advertisement to build up and maintain their exclusivity, and they're unlikely to to start discounting or donating this merchandise to people because it's going to offset the value of their brand.
Well, you guys are talking a lot about the exclusivity and the branding aspect of it. Is it a reverse logistics problem in the first place, or just a philosophical problem with our consumeristic culture? How do we stop with the massive scale of destruction? How would you respond to that, David?
Well, I think it's both a philosophical and a reverse logistics problem. We have a new economy. Things are happening differently than they did before. We used to all go to the store to buy merchandise, make a selection, and take it home. That's not happening now. Many goods are selected online and then returned later because they don't quite match our expectations. Photographs don't always match the goods that we receive. So we have a new problem to solve, and it's really going to take a combination of technology and sentiment to change it. If people want to move towards a circular economy, there'll be change.
It's different and yet it's the same. Anthony, how do you respond? What should we do?
I think this is definitely a reverse logistics problem. When we're looking at things like the growth of Amazon e-commerce, these things have just grown at a rapid clip. The other side has not, the return side has not. So we've been focusing on how to get these goods to consumers at a rapid clip, as fast as possible, as efficiently as possible, not the reverse.
Okay, what do you think? Dooner, final word.
The problem is right in the regulations. If you destroy the goods, you get 99% of your duty back. You can't recycle them. That's the biggest problem. There's a major footwear company out there that tried to recycle the soles from their shoes to give them to a park, a public park, and it took a freaking act of Congress for this to happen. So until there's some changes in the regulations, people are going to control their supply and demand supply through these destructions.
And at the end of round one, it is Dooner with 8, Anthony with 4, and David with 7. And now we go to Emily Zink for question number 2.
Reverse logistics has been around since the Sears Roebuck catalog. You know, the day people start selling products is the day returns started.
Peter Sabota is the CEO and founder of Return Logic, a returns management company for Shopify stores that provides hassle-free returns for shoppers and advanced analytics for businesses.
Right now, if I say returns, the thought most people have in their head is boxes, packages, and shipping. Those are the byproducts. The real returns problem is a data problem because most retailers do not have enough data to make intelligent business decisions.
He says companies need to understand why people returned a product in the first place and then use that data discovered by Return Logic to do something about it.
It's taken us 4 years to essentially develop the concept that we call the returns hierarchy of needs, where we take a customer from the very beginning of their problem, which is managing the customer, and by the time we get them fully launched in, let's say, 90, 180 days, we have enough data where then we can start making suggestions about optimizing their processes, adjusting their return policies, and basically driving bottom line growth.
Sabota says retailers need to stop thinking they have a returns problem, but instead realize they have a data problem. This way, they can take the necessary steps to create a return policy that produces both happy customers and revenue.
Can data help reduce returns and return revenue to a company's bottom line? I think that is the question. Anthony, you want to start us off?
Yeah, so I think data can start to help, but I think the big thing is going to have to be people entering this space. I think when more companies enter and see that this is a problem, there will be a solution. I think when we have large companies attacking the issue, that's great, but we need smaller companies as well to fill those gaps, because when we see that there's for example, Uber. If there was some type of Uber situation where your returns were picked up from your house and you didn't have to leave your house because it was so convenient for you to get those goods, it needs to be convenient for those goods to leave your home as well.
Smaller companies, bigger companies, what do you think, David?
Well, I think data is very important. You know, with 72 million packages delivered a day at peak season and 30% of those being returned, there's a lot of data to consider. Probably 20% of the goods make up 80% of the returns, and understanding the nature of those goods, the decisions that were made to purchase them, the problems associated with why they were returned, can help people consider remanufacturing, presenting the goods in a different way, and diminishing the returns are expensive. They cost people up to 44% of their revenues trying to manage it. So it's an important problem to address, and everyone has an incentive to get engaged.
What do you think, Dooner?
I mean, I'm skeptical if data itself can help with the return problem when an anomaly happens like what happened last year. Near the end of December, before Christmas, there was a higher number of returns than on January 3rd in 2019, when that's typically peak. So I don't know if a program's going to show that. I mean, I see it's kind of an inventory problem, isn't it? Knowing what consumers are going to buy, but how do you predict all of that? Just this return logic thing, and knowing how skeptical people are in supply chain about using data to begin with, I'm not sure that Sabata really has the solution here and something that people are going to really embrace. I think optimization on returns may be a better solution.
Okay, so I mean, data certainly can. I think maybe you're underselling how much data can, but you're right. I think there is a limiting factor. It's a cultural problem too, wouldn't you say?
I mean, I think so. Because what you're seeing now is that retail is getting smarter about creating walkthroughs for people, allowing people to bring returns to the store so it adds value, gets the consumer in there to make those impulse buys. So Anthony Smith said, you know, you're gonna have Uber pick goods up. Maybe that works for Amazon, but it's not gonna work for Kohl's. It's not gonna work for Walmart. It ain't gonna work for Walgreens, Anthony. So maybe, but there's just two different sides of the equation here.
Well, what do you think, Anthony? Like, do you think it's a cultural problem as much as a data problem?
I think it's definitely I think it's a demand problem, so it could be slightly a culture problem. And Dooner's wrong. I think it would work for Kohl's. I think it would work for Walgreens. I think it would work for Walmart. I think it would work for all these department stores because it would be independent contractors that would pick up these goods and return it to that facility. And so I think that when we're looking at this, we want these goods immediately. We want to get rid of them immediately.
Last thought, David, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Anthony to some point, but there are some products that are delivered that Uber can't pick up. They're heavy, bulky, you know, we can't return swimming pools and trampolines and gun safes and pool tables easily. They're complicated, expensive, and difficult to repackage and handle to move back. Understanding why people are buying things and deciding not to keep them, it is important to do, and you're going to get that from data. The other thing that I think is really important is addressing behavioral issues. I have this lovely wife. She will buy 5 pairs of shoes online, pick through the 3 that fit, and send back 2 that don't. So the experience of buying drives recycling or drives returns, and it needs to be addressed.
After 2 competitive rounds of banter, it is Dooner with 15, Anthony with 10, and David with 14. While suppliers and retailers can prepare for things like the holiday shopping season, reverse logistics has become a year-round issue. Many consumers seem to prefer having a place to go for their returns. Recently, it was announced that Walgreens and FedEx are partnering on a new reverse logistics initiative. At select Walgreens stores across the country, customers can easily print out their FedEx return labels and return their package at the drugstore. A lot of customers seem to enjoy having a physical location for their returns. But do these partnerships create enough value for customers? What do you think, David? Let's start with you.
I think they do create value. If you think about it, they're really consolidation centers, and what's happening is the reverse of what others have been doing on the parcel delivery business by injecting pallet loads into the post office before delivery. This is a way to get traffic off of our neighborhood streets. I mean, the average American receives 28 packages today delivered 1 at a time. They could fit all 28 of those in their trunks. But our behavior has changed. It's creating congestion in our streets. People do need to go to the store for other reasons, so having a place to drop things off is a good thing. I think consumers will eventually kind of expect that wherever they go locally, they can drop off parcels and pick them up.
What do you think, Dooner?
Yeah, I mean, this is going back to the last question. This is the antithesis of what Anthony Smith said. This isn't sending Uber to your house. This is bringing it back, like Kohl's has. And the reason that they do that is they need to bring the foot traffic in. Their sales are down 30% the beginning of the year for Kohl's. They're in a desperate situation. The retail is almost like the music industry, where everybody wanted to go to streaming, but the music industry is like, we make money off CDs. Retail stores, Kohl's the biggest department store in the United States of America, 30,000 feet footprint per store. They need to bring people in those stores, support them. They can't just go to e-com. It's not that easy, so they have to create value within inside their own walls, not by sending an Uber to your door or an independent contractor.
Anthony, how do you respond to that?
First of all, I think that when we're looking at traditional e-commerce stores, when we're looking at Kohl's, things like that, they're dying. They're falling off. They need to be able to compete in an e-commerce space. What are we doing? We're turning these things into the post offices? No one wants to go to Kohl's, stand in line for 5 hours for a return just so they can return their pool? No, I don't think so. I'm not buying it. I want to have my return come to my door. I want that to be carried. I want to have minimal amount to do with sitting in a physical store and waiting and going through that whole inconvenience.
Well, Anthony, with so many of these partnerships emerging, do you think it's going to lead to some consumer confusion almost?
Yes, and I think that could be a benefit for some of these retailers. Make the return process as confusing as possible. And maybe that will reduce some of the returns that we have. But I think definitely consumer confusion will play a factor, because I know there's been times where I've gotten a good that I wasn't sure about, and I was a little bit confused on how to go about the return. I decided to just keep it.
Wow. Okay. So what do you think, Dooner?
That's going to create confusion? Yeah, I mean, there's so many, like, do I go to Walgreens or do I go to CVS to return my FedEx box? But I think that is great, because who owns a printer anymore? I mean, maybe older people have printers, but I don't know anybody who has a printer anymore. So if I got to print my FedEx label, I got to go to Walgreens. Then know what happens when I go to Walgreens? I buy some Harbio gummy bears, you know? I get stuck in line, I make those impulse buys, and Walgreens is getting the ad value of having FedEx there. It makes perfect sense to integrate these two types of services if retail stores want to bring people back inside.
David, you've made the point that it does take some congestion off of our final mile streets, but like, will it lead to some confusion, and do you think everybody wants it?
Well, I think some people might be confused. Others will appreciate the choice and the opportunity associated with it. I think organizations like Kohl's, who've partnered also with Amazon for their what they call their hub counter, will benefit from foot traffic. When people make a return, they get cash. They can spend that money. There are still some items that are a little bit easier to buy in first person than online. For example, sofas, some clothing. You want to kind of try it on before you buy it. And so I think there's a rationale for it. It's about giving people choice and letting them decide what works best for them.
And at the end of 3 competitive rounds of supply chain banter, we have Dooner with 22, Anthony with 15, and David with 22. And now for our lightning round, where things get a little bit more intense. 15 seconds per response, and you have to answer with big deal or little deal. According to one FreightWaves survey, companies specializing in clothing and accessories often have return rates higher than 40%. Yet only 3% of respondents said that reverse logistics would be their biggest supply chain investment. Big deal or little deal? Why or why not? Dooner.
It's a little deal because it's pretty obvious what they're going to do. As we started the show talking about drawback and incentivize people to destroy these things. And we're talking about fast fashion, you're talking about these items, that's what they get. They get thrown into the inferno or they get shredded. So it'll be a big deal if they change that. But right now it's a little deal, Chad.
Okay, big deal or little deal, Anthony?
Wow, it's a big deal. Big deal because it's been so much emphasis on creating more, and no emphasis on how to absorb the return policy. So we're just creating more returns. We're just looking at how can we get more stuff out that creates more of the problem.
David, what do you think?
I think it's a big deal. I think because of the potential environmental impact. If we don't start thinking about a way to kind of utilize resources over and over again and without waste, we're going to continue to build up problems in terms of the economy and our environment.
According to consultant Satish Jindal, Amazon tracks their customers' return behavior and labels them good, bad, or ugly, and adjusts the prices it presents to those customers accordingly. Amazon avoids the problem of widespread price inflation to support a minority of frequent returners. Their customers effectively pay for the services they demand. Big deal or little deal? Why or why not? Anthony Smith.
Big deal, and I think it's not a bad thing at all. I think when we're looking at retailers, we should see that they start baking in returns into their prices more, because it's going to really help their bottom line. And I think when we're looking at returns, that's going to be a competitive thing where you see that some people offer free retail returns and some price them.
David, what do you think? Big deal or little deal?
I think it's a little deal. In fact, they probably use data also to change what they present to customers, not just what the price they offer them. But the disincentive of being charged for being a bad or an ugly buyer isn't probably going to be significant enough to change the behavior.
Dooner, final word?
That's a huge deal. This is the kind of return logic and data I can get behind. It punishes those weak buyers who send everything back and try to raise the prices up for us. It's incredibly smart, and it's going to solve some problems. It's going to make people go shop elsewhere. Brilliant move, Amazon.
Happy Returns, a consumer retail and e-commerce return service, consolidates retailers' returns, repackages those in good enough shape for resale, and sends them back in big pallets. The company has also begun employing reusable packing to reduce waste. Big deal or little deal? Why or why not? David.
Well, I think it's a big deal. Probably the biggest contribution they're making is providing, they bought 10,000 totes, and so it's a lot easier for people to return merchandise by placing it in a tote. Instead of finding a cardboard box and slapping a label on it, they can just take that product back. Also, the consolidation really saves cost on a return.
Dooner, what do you think?
I mean, it's completely wrong again. Little deal. Who's using the service? What's the VC? Who's investing in it? I mean, Amazon, we talked about them earlier, they do a great thing, which is Amazon warehouse deals. You can buy a dented box for a little bit off. Amazon's already solving the problem.
Anthony, final word.
Little deal, sounds good, it feels good, but what does it really mean? There's not going to be much of a push until there's enough money behind it, and no one really cares about sustainability until it becomes a problem. So I don't think it's really going to be a big deal until there is a true sustainability issue here.
And for our final tally of the score, it is Dooner with 31, Anthony Smith with 24, and David Falconberry with 28. So, Tim Dooner, congratulations! The Off the Supply Chain Champion of the Week. What are you going to do with your time?
I'm walking up and down Market Street showing this thing off.
Well, good. That's what we like to hear. Congratulations to all of our panelists. This was a high scoring Off the Supply Chain, blowing it up, a new all-time high for all of our panelists. Thank you. Good job.
Join us on Friday, December 6th as Associate Editor J.P. Hamstead, Editor-at-Large John Kingston, and market expert Henry Byers have a lively discussion about the supply chain wars with China. See you then.